Welcome back to this week's pod. So it's the year is 1985, and this week we have a super special guest, three-time Grammy award-winning music producer, David Bottrill.
Yeah. Uh, World renowned. He's worked with some great artists. Silverchair, Tool, Smashing Pumpkins, Coheed and Cambria, GodSmack, Stone Sour, Mastodon,
On
Peter
the Earth, Peter
Gabriel. Come on.
Gabriel, King Crimson. You name
Yes.
it, this man has probably worked on it. So yeah, we had an excellent chat with him. So hope everybody enjoys.
Three, two, one.
Of course.
My pleasure, guys. Happy to be here. Nice to meet you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank
So,
you.
hailing from Dundas, Ontario.
That's where I came from.
Awesome. So, give us a little rundown about where you came from and what kind of got you started off in the beginning of your career. Not necessarily audio, but yeah, take us through.
Okay, so I grew up in Dundas, which is basically the west end of Hamilton. It's a little town on the west end of Hamilton. And when I was a kid, went through school, like most of us, disaffected, didn't know quite what I wanted to do. I was good at sports, so I played sports in school. I was on the basketball team and on the volleyball team and things like that, but didn't really know what I wanted to do with life. So kind of trundled around doing different things, cutting grass, washing windows, that sort of thing. And my girlfriend at the time happened to have a contact. Her uncle ran the studio in Hamilton called Grant Avenue Studios. And it was Bob and Daniel Lanois who owned that studio. So I went down there, eyes wide open, green as a, blade of grass, said, give me a job. They said, no, you can come and hang out and we'll see if we like you. So for about 6 months, I spent time interning, what they call it now, and just learning what it was like to run a session. It was one of those. It was one of those weird things because I was sort of disaffected, didn't know what I wanted to do. Knew I wanted to have something to do with music because I was a guitar player, piano player, terrible musician, but wanted to have something to do with it. And like I said, my girlfriend Chris at the time said, "Oh, my uncle's got the studio. Why don't you go down? Ask a few questions." So I did, and I walked in the door, looked to my left, and there was the control room, and I literally fell in love with what I had no idea what I was falling in love with, but I did. It was like,
Yeah.
that's what I want to do. So, like I said, I did an internship there, and when there was a job available, they gave me a job as an assistant, and I made the whopping sum of $300 a month
This sounds
and
exactly
all
right.
the leftover pizza I could eat. Uh, and worked on sessions with Martha and the Muffins and the Parachute Club and Luba, and a little bit with when they brought you two in to do a little vocals
Oh,
on
wow. Yeah.
a couple things, and just learned my way of how to run a session and how to help people write music, that sort of thing. So yeah, it was a very fortuitous moment, but when I got into the studio and I knew that I wanted to do that, I did my best to make myself indispensable. So whatever needed to be done, I did it. So if it was logging tapes, if it was cleaning toilets, if it was getting tea, whatever needed to be done that I could still hang around and watch what was going on, I would do it. So that was sort of the very early stages and beginnings of my career. Dan and Bob were both incredible mentors to me, teaching me how to run a session, or how to be visible when you needed to be visible, how to be invisible when you needed to be invisible, and yeah, and I just sort of started from there.
Yeah. I think that's a great learning experience too. Just not to give them any reason to kick you out of the studio, right? You do everything you possibly can, and in so kind of soaking up every little bit of experience you can from, like you said, you two coming in early on. Like that must have been a huge great experience early on in learning all this stuff.
It certainly was, and it was the time period was when there were a lot of sort of assistants on the street like me who wanted jobs in studios. So if you weren't performing as much as as well as the next guy, you could be out of a job. There was no job security in it, so you had to make yourself both amenable to what was going on, a good person to hang out with, you know, musically adapt to some degree, and just willing to do whatever needed to be done within reason, obviously, and legality. But if you wanted to be involved, you had to show that you wanted to be involved. And there were so many people that were like, well, I guess I don't because the hours are too much. And the hours were, I mean, we were working 18, 20 hours a day sometimes. You'd get a few hours of sleep, come up the next session, get ready to set up. I'm setting up mics, tearing down mics, building the sessions. The next day, you're doing one session one day, and then it's a jingle session the next day. You've got to record, 15 different jingles in one day. And it's an 18-hour day, and then you got to tear down. The next morning, there's another session coming in, with the band. So you just had to be, if you loved what you were doing, then you put up with it, And if people that didn't really love what they were doing or thought it was like, well, this is a lot of fun and glamorous and everything, the moment they get, put in front of an 18, 20-hour day, they're like, yeah, okay, that's too much. For me, it was like, well, I don't know anything else other than banging nails. So, like I would love to do this. And so, yeah, I'll hang out for 20 hours. I'll sleep underneath the console.
That's right.
I'll do all that.
It is better than hammering nails up in High Prairie.
I think so, yeah, and the minus 60 or whatever nonsense goes
in
on.
minus 60. Oh, there was a time. So we were doing it. We were building one time, building a roof trusses over a garage, and it started to hail. That North Alberta hail that comes
Rocks.
down. We were in the middle of nailing off. We couldn't stop. So we're in the middle of nailing off this truss, getting battered by hail. I probably still have bruises from it.
That's incredible. That's awesome.
So when did you finally get kind of behind, the board, the panel, and you were kind of had full control of the studio yourself?
So after about I guess it was 2.5 years of working there. There were sessions that would come in that were more of a budget session. They couldn't afford an engineer. So that's when the assistant takes over. So I cut my teeth on a lot of that. There were jingle sessions that were going on. There was a company called MJM, which was Michael J. McCurley Productions, and they did jingles. And sometimes they needed an engineer to work on those jingles. So I did that. There was a lot of tape cutting. There was a lot of, you had to fly by the seat of your pants, get things mic'd up, get things recorded quick, because time is money. And so, you had to get it done very, very quickly. And I really cut my teeth on a lot of those early sessions. It's funny. People say, well, have you ever recorded things that you don't like or that music? What do you do? And I say, well, you know what? You find something within that session that appeals to you, whether it's a new technique to learn, or there's something about the music that you like, either the singer or the bass player is kick-ass. So you want to listen to that guy. So you find something that really you can latch onto and really enjoy, and work the session around that. So I cut my teeth doing those kind of early sessions, and then when my work kind of got the notice of Dan, who was doing bigger sessions, of course, and I was assisting for him. But when he went over to start working with you two and working with Peter Gabriel, he's like, yeah, that guy, he's not bad. He's okay at some things. Maybe I should get him over to help me out on this. So he called, and that's when I ended up moving from Grand Avenue over to England.
Crazy. And then you found yourself there for give or take 20 years at that point, eh?
It was about 20 years I lived there, yes.
That's crazy. So what was the first session over there? Because I know like you worked on So, and then you worked on U2. Was it U2 previous to So?
So the first sessions that we did were at the barn where Peter Gabriel's studio. It wasn't Real World at the time. It was the initial Real World, which was kind of like a cow barn. Kevin Killian was engineering, and I was assisting. And we finished off So, and I was supposed to go over there for about like 6 weeks or so. Well, it ended up being like we didn't finish the record. Then it went into January, and then into February. We finally finished off the record. But by that time, I'd gotten to know Peter, and I'd gotten to know people at the studio. And Dan and I were due to do another record with the band called the Psychedelic Furs.
Oh.
And we got over to a rehearsal place in Surrey that we started working with them. And they said, well, we haven't got songs written yet, but we're working on them. And Dan had just spent like a year pulling songs out of Peter Gabriel. And he's like, you know what, guys, I don't want to do this again. Call me when you have some songs written and we'll do something. He decided to go back to Canada and said, well, do you want to come with me and I can find you some work, or we can find something, or you're in England now, maybe you want to find something here. And so I just thought, you know what, I'll try. We had about another month left in the apartment we'd rented in London. I said, I'm going to try and find something here just because I'm here. because I thought, well, I've always got, Dan and I got along well. So it's like, well, he'd find me something if I really had to go back to Canada. But I thought, you know what, let me just try and find some work here. So I kind of trolled around studios and went there, and then I ended up going back down to Bath. Found some work in Peter's studio that needed to be done, and just ended up sort of by osmosis, just kind of carried on working in that. And it just, the relationship that we had with Peter just sort of grew. He started booking sessions in there with Joni Mitchell, and so I would engineer for her, and then she left, and then Dan would come back with Robbie Robertson, and Peter would sing on that, so I'd be recording that, and just sort of by osmosis. And then when it came time to the tour, Peter was he'd already bought the place that became Real World, and they were rehearsing there. And so I was over there helping, because I knew where all the tapes were, and I knew where all the parts were for the musicians to relearn, because it had been a long time before that they'd done the record. So I knew where everything was, and I was always setting up Peter's gear anyway. The tour started to grow, and Sledgehammer sort of took off as a song. And it's like, okay, they're starting to book bigger venues. The stage manager, who used to always do Peter's keyboards as well, was like, well, I don't have time to do this. It's like, we better get the Bottrill out here and do that. So they rushed to get me a visa, got me on the tour, and then I ended up touring with them for 2.5 years. And our relationship just grew. So when we went back to Real World, I kept working for him, and it was just one of those things that sort of snowballed into 10 years of working for Peter.
Crazy. That's amazing. That's a wicked story too, because of course then you get dragged on tour, which is something you're not really into. But of course, I mean, it's another learning experience.
I'm not a touring guy.
It's awesome.
But I loved it. It was great fun. Like, really, I had a great time.
Yeah.
But it was just nothing that I'd ever really thought. Like, I'd done like small bar gigs of a couple sound, help out some people or rehearsals or something like that. But that wasn't really my jam. So, when we went on tour, it's like, well, okay, I'll figure it out, and I did. And we kept going, and, it was just one of, like, I kind of feel like half the time I've fallen into things without really any qualification and just figured it out.
That's awesome. But you're like, so like I study audio engineering in school, like most people do now, kind of thing. You go to school,
Sure.
Go to a studio or whatever, you do internships and stuff like that through the school stuff. So like, this is coming from a time when there wasn't that thing. You had to go bang on the door, and the only way to actually get any experience was to go sweep the floor, get the coffee, get the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's awesome to see, even at this short point in your kind of long career, like how hard work pays off, right? So you put yourself forward. That's really cool. So then after you work with Peter Gabriel, you get a chance to work with Brian Eno. Is that kind of like the timeline from there?
Yeah, I mean, at the studio, Brian would come down and either work with Dan on things, or like Brian had come to Grand Avenue Studios, so I knew him from then. Way back when in the ambient series. That. In fact, when I went to Grand Avenue Studios, some of the first things that were coming out of the control room were the music for airports and the Apollo soundtrack and things like that. So I kind of, the beginnings of my studio career was influenced by music that wasn't necessarily all just like top 40 pop or rock music or whatever. It was this ambient stuff that I'd never heard before, and it was like, okay, well, this is interesting. And it was sort of like like creatively influenced, in that it wasn't a commercial exercise. Not that people didn't want to make money doing it, but Brian was from the art school, English art school world, and his process to making music was unconventional, to say the least. So when I was then working at Real World and Brian came back to do some work, we already knew each other. So he's like, oh yeah, I remember you, little kid, came out of Grand Avenue. And we ended up doing, a few things together. Jeffrey Oriema was one of them for Real World. And some of the things that, he worked on Peter's record that we were working on, the S record. So, yeah, Brian said to me once, he said, every time I see you, you're on the floor coiling cables. Something, because every time he would walk in the room and I'd be down there, like, plugging in mics, somebody, oh yeah, hey. He's like, every time I see you, that's what you're doing.
That's awesome. Man. So you think working with Brian, because like Brian, I mean, especially like on the ambient albums that Brian did and stuff, like, do you think that helped you down the road, especially with, like Rush, Tool, Muse, like those kind of, not necessarily ambient albums, but they have that atmosphere kind of blend to all that stuff?
I think that the influences that I've had in various styles and capacities of music have all influenced me in the way that I approach a production or a mix on a project. I've been really, really fortunate to have been introduced to so many different styles and genres and approaches to making music in my career that you know I, I've been like a sponge in absorbing all of those different philosophies of creation and all those different styles of the ways of making music that I'm able to go into a project now and be like, oh, you're trying to do this thing. Well, you know, back, back in sort of 1992, I was doing this thing. We approached it this way. That might help you in the way that you do. Much like anybody who learns a job over years, you figure out different techniques in how to achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve. And I've just been very fortunate to have had so many different influences, so many different mentors and styles of ways of creating that I've been able to adapt all of those to the different projects that I work on and utilize those techniques and philosophies in the creation of music that I've been lucky to be involved with.
That's cool. That's really cool. So I
Yeah.
do want to ask. I got to ask you now too about, because I studied it a bit in school. It was the Passion soundtrack. That was something that
Yeah.
we studied a lot because, like, all the different instruments and tonal qualities, all the kind of things that we got into or whatever. So, what was that experience like? Because that is, to me, in terms of like the Gabriel's work, like it really stands out. It was controversial at the time. Like the movie was controversial and stuff at the time. So, what was it like working on that project?
Pivotal for me. Again, being introduced to an instrument that you've never seen before and having to try and record it in some way that faithfully reproduces the way that it sounded. Uh, I mean, it was really, again, fly by the seat of your pants. It's like, well, play it and let me listen to it. Where's the sound coming from? Okay, let's try a mic here. Let's try a mic there. Let's try this mic there. Should it be a large diaphragm condenser? Should it be a dynamic mic? Should it be, like a pinpoint small diaphragm condenser? Like figuring out the right way to record different things and with Peter, you don't really get a second chance. So there's an interesting story. It's not an instrument that is unique, but the drums that we used on I think 3 tracks were basically Peter had met up with a drummer called Billy Cobham, who is a very famous jazz drummer from America, and uh, Peter had met him in London at an event, and he convinced him to come down to Bath to play on this song. Well, he called me and said, "I got Billy Cobham. We're coming down. We're going to play on this, one of these tracks. Get it set up." So we had an old, well, not an old, a Sonar drum kit, and we set it up in what was called the Stone Room at Real World, which was basically a room that had a glass floor and you can see the river going underneath it. And it was all
Wow.
old Bath stone, had this amazing sound. So I set up this drum kit. We kind of got it tuned up and I mic'd it up. Now, the train journey down to Bath was about hour and a half, 2 hours to get. So they're on the train. I'm setting up the drums, and I get the tech, the not a drum tech, but just like an electrical tech to come in and hit the drums. Well, great guy, but he was this small, skinny guy. I don't know if you know Billy Cobham, but he's this huge, strong, muscular character.
Okay.
Anyway, so I get this guy Neil to hit the drums, and I'm like, well, I guess that I'm trying to get a line check of some kind, a little bit of EQ, and I'm like, okay, well, let's try this out. So Billy gets there, Peter gets there. It's about 11 o'clock at night, and so we play him through. And this is like, so I have to not only get this ready, I have to make a slave to. So we had sorry, you're not supposed to say slave anymore, but it's a master tape, and then it's a synchronized tape that runs with it that you can do the recording. So we play back the tapes. He listens to the track, goes, okay, I got some ideas, goes down. And so I'm on the talkback. I'm like, so Billy, can I get can I hear a bit of drums? And he literally does one tom roll like this, very quick. I'm like, okay, thanks, and like get going. And with Peter, you have to hit record right away. You can't not. So I knew that I wasn't going to be overloading anything. I wasn't going to be just so I'd set my levels. It was still we had Dolby SR, so it was keeping the noise reduction out. So I wasn't too hot, but I'd sort of taken the equalization out because I wasn't sure about what it sounded. So we start recording, and we're going through the track, and he's playing, and it's really great. Like it's what he's playing is really good. So we do it, and in the middle of the track, I'm like, okay, let me get the EQs, and bang, and I pop all the EQs in because it's like it's a little bit more exciting. Halfway through the track, cardinal sin. You're not supposed to do this, but I do this anyway because like whatever. And we get to the end of the track, and Peter goes, "That's great. Did you get it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I recorded it, but we had no drum sound. We had like," and he's like, "Doesn't matter. That was awesome. We're done. One take, no drum sound check at all done." And that drum performance got used on the final track of the song, that the outro, "It Is Accomplished," and it got used on two others, one at half speed that we slowed it down so that it was this floppy old drum thing. So
Wow.
yeah, I mean but that was the nature of recording with Peter. So the illustration I'm making is that you have to be ready to record and recording all the time with him, so that and with most artists, because when you have a great performance, it's not like you can go back and get that same performance. You can fuck with the sound. Sorry, am I?
Yeah,
You
you
can
can
say
go
whatever you
go
can.
right ahead. Yeah.
You can alter the sound and work on it,
Yeah.
subsequently, but you've got to get that performance down. And that's, I learned that very quickly, that you've got to be recording all the time, and we got it down, and it ended up on 3 pieces within the soundtrack and on the soundtrack album.
Amazing.
It's funny how it goes, though, right? Like I read a lot of magazines and articles and podcasts, whatever else. It seems like the stuff that ends up in the final, like how many times I hear, "Oh, we went in to do bed tracks in this dude's house just to have something to go to the studio with," and then 80% of that ended up in our final mix. It's like
Mhm.
it's the performance. It is
Sure,
mostly
sure.
performance based, I think.
It is all about the performance,
Yeah,
really. It's like a great performance can make an average sound amazing,
yeah, yeah.
right?
I would agree.
But a subsequent, a substandard performance cannot make a great sound be great.
Yeah, no, I agree. So should we get into Tool with you now? I'm sure I know you're very proud, but I'm sure you've talked about this tons. So we'll talk about it a little bit. I'm interested in talking about Silverchair here too. So we got a couple other things we want to get to. So we'll start with Tool. Like, so when did you start with it? Because I think from what I can find on the interwebs, of course, it's at Salviel. So like the live album or whatever. Is that where you jumped in with Tool?
No, no, we did. So Tool called after I had done some work with Peter and King Crimson, and David Sylvian and Robert Fripp record.
Yes. Yeah.
Tool called and said, we want this guy to talk to him about making our next record. And I've told the story a number of times, but I thought they were talking. They thought I was somebody else because I'd never done like a metal record
Yeah.
before. It wasn't really my, thing. Heavy progressive like King Crimson, sure, but it turned out that they really liked some of the King Crimson stuff I did. They liked some of the world music that I had worked on. They thought that it would be interesting for them to use a producer that wasn't a standard Los Angeles metal producer. They wanted somebody with a different influence. So they brought me in for the Anima record, and I went for the rehearsals there, and we, listened to the tracks, and I said, "Great, do you want what do you want my input on, and what are you interested in working with me for?" Then they said these very reasons of like, we want your sensibility of different styles of music that we don't know. We know what metal is, what we want from the metal part, but we want you for the other stuff. So we made that record, and then. We did Salival, and then moved on to Lateralis after that.
That's awesome. So I guess really you jumped in when Justin Chandler kind of joined the band, then to a certain degree, I guess.
Yes, exactly. Justin was new in the band at that time, but still very instrumental in the writing, some of the writing process. Um, yeah, and then became very instrumental later on as they built, that band. The great thing about that band is it's very like they're extremely creative in how they write, and they work very hard in refining the compositions that they have, which is like they don't settle very easily
Yes.
on one thing. They work on it, deconstruct, reconstruct. Adam particularly is a real master at finding um, where the fine bits, the emphasis needs to be put, uh, both on the riff and on the tonality of the riff, but also on the full composition as to what's going on. So it's yeah, he is, and that band is a real. Uh, they're a real gelling unit. The way that they all move together.
So they are notorious for coming to the studio well prepared, right? So
Yes.
like how pliable are they with, you know, any of your ideas?
I think I got involved in both cases earlier than the recording process. So I was there for a few weeks before that. So there were a few times where I had some ideas, but they are pretty set on the way that they come into the studio. They want to know where they are, what they're doing, and then build upon the foundations that they've worked on in rehearsal, which is an amazing work ethic that they all have. So yeah, they are. You're right. They come to the studio very prepared, but they're not inflexible. They're open to good suggestion.
Right? Yeah, like four total professionals, right? And probably one of, if not the best drummers I think we've ever seen. I mean, so like just recording that,
Mhm.
how would you say, you know, like Peter Gabriel one take? Do they like multi-track? Do they like to do more than once and kind of, you know, or
So with Tool, I think we probably did on every song, like we probably ended up doing like between 3 and 6 takes on it, and then edited between them. But generally, there'd be like one take that was the foundation, and then we would edit in a few things from others. The beauty of Danny is that he's such a machine that his tempo, they don't play to click.
Yeah, that's crazy.
right?
So the way, and again, as I said, the way they move as a band together, it's totally locked because they rehearse, and young bands, they often say to me, it's like, well, why can't I sound like that without a click? It's because I say, because you haven't been rehearsing for a year or more on these songs to get them so tight, and that musician that you're playing with so well, when they're going to speed up, when they're going to slow down. It just takes, there's this stupid internet meme of like the musician. Well, how are you so magically good? Well, it's just practice. It's like, no, no, no. There must be some intrinsic magical thing. No, no, no. It's practice, and that's the thing. There is a certain amount of magic in musicians, but a lot of that comes out of hard work, of practicing and working together with the other musicians. That's why they can play without a click, and I can edit between tracks, and you don't hear a tempo change because they work. They know what tempo they want it to be at, and they just work so hard at it. It's not rocket science. It's just practice.
Yeah, like first, like, I mean, this was a while ago, but when I first found out, of course, that they record and perform no click, especially like their show with all the visual stuff going on, this kind of cued along, and I'm sure they
Mhm.
do kind of. They must do a little bit live to kind of get the jive of it all, but that is crazy to me.
Mhm.
Like the like 10-minute songs and segues, and it's so tight and it's so good. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
crazy. Is
Different.
there anybody have you worked with anybody else that kind of has like that same type of work ethic, comes that prepared?
I would say King Crimson comes
Okay, yeah,
prepared, but in a different way. King Crimson came prepared from the decades of playing before they got to the point.
yeah,
And so the musicians are so good that they were able to read each other. They speak a language that I only dip into a little bit, and most people don't. That is there's a knowledge of what somebody's going to do. It's almost telepathic when you get that good. Like Robert Fripp, the way that he's built his ability through the discipline, and I use that word. He uses that word in his music, but it's the discipline of working, practicing so much and working so hard at it that you become so one with your instrument that it becomes an expression of who you are, not so much, well, you're just playing a tune. It's like it flows through him without him thinking about it. It goes straight from the heart to the instrument, as opposed to from the brain to the heart to the instrument.
What was it like working with Robert Fripp, like in that capacity? Like, I mean, he's a legend. He's, considered a guitar virtuoso. What's it like working with him in the studio?
It was fascinating because I thought when I worked with him, the first thing I did with him was the David Sylvian and Robert Fripp, the First Day collaboration record. And I had the impression that, well, David's going to be really flippant and like throw things off the cuff and improvisational, and Robert's going to be very professorial and mechanical. And it was entirely opposite. Robert was like, we did this one thing where we did a song. So we were working in the studio, and they had rehearsed with Robert and Trey Gunn, who was a stick player, now a war guitar player, but he played stick at the time, and Jerry Marotta, the drummer. And then they had done Robert and Trey and David Sylvian, but they'd never all four been in the studio together. Jerry Marotta, who I love, fantastic drummer, great character, he takes up a lot of space in a room. He's just a big, boisterous New York American guy, takes up a lot of space, right? For good reasons and not so good reasons. And David was the kind of person who would sort of sit back and not really say something that was bothering him until it was too late. So we got sort of 4 songs into the record, and Jerry would come into the control room after we do a take, sort of push me out of the way, go to the console, pull down everything but the drums to listen to the drums. It would drive David crazy. So this went on for a couple of weeks at the studio in upstate New York. And then we broke for Christmas, and David he said, I can't go back in the studio with this guy. So I had my computer system early, like Roland S770, and I like recorded Jerry and Trey doing sort of loopy things. And anyway, I kind of became like the drummer in the band a little bit in all the loops and sort of programming that I would do. So we did this song called Darshan, which was like, we basically ran the whole length of a 2-inch 30-ips tape to do the song. So it was about a 14-minute song. And then there was like a 3-minute period of which Robert was to do a solo in it. Well, we set him up at night, and he had like basically at his feet, he had 2 monitors, he had his rack of gear, and he'd set up his sound, and we ran the tape, and he's like, he played a little bit. He's like, okay, I'm going to do the solo in the morning. I can't do it right now. I've got to meditate on it. So he meditated on it all night long. We came in the next morning. It was all set up. Tapes were up. Basically, it was us hit record, and Robert played through, did his solo. He didn't even speak to me when he got up. Like, we were having breakfast. It's like, not a word. It's like, okay, we're going in. We get it, re-record. It's like, that was it. And it was done. One take, like, no messing around. It's like, he'd thought about it, meditated on it. He had his guitar at breakfast, just not plugged in, just like warming up. Did the solo, and David looks at me and I look at him and was like, "Yep, that's it."
That's crazy.
And he was like, I thought that he'd be like, "No, it's like note by note, do this." Not at all. Totally. But because he had worked so many years, like practicing and becoming one with the instrument, that's what it took. That solo was like, okay, it's just like it's coming straight out of me. This is my emotional thought process going on the tape, and that was it. Same thing, done. Record it one time. Don't not record, because you're gonna miss it.
You'll miss something.
Yeah.
Always have a mic up. That's the rule. Always have a mic up.
Always have the mic. Yeah, sure.
Have you ever caught anything like really good just by having the record button pressed so early on in a session?
Oh, like countless times.
Yeah.
I don't know. You just always record, and you get these things, and even if it's just a snippet of something, even if it's something that you can't replace in another way. Vocals, same things. Like you're doing a guide vocals, like you record it with a good microphone. You record it with as good quality as you can, because you never know, that might be the final take.
Mm-hmm. And going back to Tool, like what would you say was there any difference in the recording process through Anima to Lateralis, or was it kind of you kind of approached them the same, or?
Yeah, I would say this, that from Anima to Lateralis, we'd already opened up our lines of communications. We knew how people thought. So actually, the Anima record was more difficult just because we had to learn each other. The Lateralis record was not as difficult because our lines of communication were open, and I knew what they wanted, and I knew what I had to contribute. So it was actually, I mean, the band was in a more um, fragile state because they'd been through a number of years of business problems, management, lawyers, all that stuff. So they were a little bit raw from those experiences. Um, so, when we came in to record, there was some things that were going on within the band that needed sorting out. We got to the studio, we started to record. They had some band meetings in order to kind of clear the air of some things, and then we got on to recording. Then it was fine. But I mean, we recreated the same process that we did the first time with the studios, um, Cello or Ocean Way in uh, Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. Then we went to the Hook out in Van Nuys, and then mixed at Larrabee. Uh,
Okay.
so they're the same three studios for both records, which is why they probably have similar characteristics. Although I would say that they're quite different in that I would say Anima is like it's a collection of great songs, and Lateralis is just it's one piece of art that
Yeah.
you don't have to listen all the way through, but it's a lot better if you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the few, like, I don't very rarely do I pick off songs on that one. I will say that for sure. Like Parabola, maybe every now and then I'll pick that
Yeah.
one off. But yeah,
Yep.
it's an album.
Which is interesting because that's the only one that was done in a different tuning, right? Because it was the
Oh yeah,
C drop guitar,
yeah,
right?
Mm.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think
Because
Paul
most of it's just
D'Amato
in
had
standard drop D.
some amount of work in writing of that song too,
Oh really?
from way back when. I think there was a certain like he had worked on that at one point.
Oh crazy.
But yeah, I love that. I
That's
love
pretty cool.
Parabola. It's a great song.
Yeah, it's yeah, I love that album. It's incredible. Like,
Hmm.
so to me, it's almost like Lateralis is like a step up, right? Like, obviously, you're saying you got to know them better, but like, it's almost like the pieces came together. I don't want to say better because it's not the right way of saying it, but they're smoother. It had, and not to say that it's one piece of art, but like the sound is a little bit more hi-fi. Everything's a little bit more in its place. It's almost like the band, but what I mean. You physically know the band better.
Sure.
So what was it like recording like those tones on that album? Because I know same idea. Like everybody in that band is very, this is the way I want it to sound. So like, what's your role in that kind of thing? I guess is my question really.
I think the role of a producer or a mixer really is to help. It's either to help a band develop their sound, or with a band like Tools to help them realize their sound, because they have it in their minds what they want, and you know the producer and engineer, as much as anything, is the conduit to try to help them get there. And I think there was, for me, like those records, like I think we developed a great symbiotic relationship over those two records, and we're able to, like you said, I think with Lateralis, achieve finally at that stage of their creative lives what they wanted to achieve. I think we were able, because we had done the two records previous to that, we were able to sort of um, reach the climax of what became Lateralis because of our prior relationship with the other projects.
So I want to ask you a technical question now. In terms of, so like, were you kind of doing much engineering on the Tool stuff? Because I know they
Yeah,
use their own guy as well.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so in terms of the drum sound, because I have to ask, is there anything specific that you guys were doing there? Like, you kind of baffling using small rooms? Because it sounds really big but tight at all times. It's possibly one of the crispiest drum
Well,
sounds
I
ever.
mean, there was close mics on it, but the room at Cello was quite big, but it wasn't a really reverberant room. So it had a specific characteristic, and on Anima, in fact, um, because I wanted to try to bolster the sound a little bit on what he was doing, because I thought, well, it's just a three piece essentially,
Yeah.
three piece and vocals. I wanted to get a lot of beef out of the drums, so we actually had like a small PA set up behind him, partially because he played a lot of electronics, and I wanted them to blend in with the tonality of the drums, because he played it all live. He didn't overdub the electronics parts. So I wanted them to feel like they were part of the drum performance. So in order to get that into the room mics, I set up the PA behind and amplified the electronics.
That's
But I also thought, well, what if we also feed in some of the close mics on the toms and the snare and the kick? So we actually got like a live kind of sound going on in the
cool.
room. And the other guys, their amps were in booths and stuff like that. So I was able to get this big beefy sound that was all, coming from the drums and in the mics coming from the PA, because it was literally right behind it. It was just sitting right here. So the PA's pumping out direct mics without feeding back. Like I did it in a way that they weren't feeding back on themselves, but they were bolstering the actual room sound. So the drums were sort of unnaturally loud in the room,
That's crazy.
but managed to come through the overheads to beef it up even more than just a straight drum kit, and then electronics. And the electronics just blended into the sound of the drums because they were still coming through the room mics.
That's cool. That's an interesting take. I've never heard anybody doing that. That's pretty sweet, actually. I'll put that on my notes for later.
Yeah,
Try this.
it works sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah, I
Because we
imagine.
tried it again on Lateralis, and it didn't work
Didn't quite get
for
it.
whatever reason.
Yeah, something different about something going on. But yeah, Lateralis, I don't know. It just from an engineering standpoint, like the drum sound on that thing is just that's the one.
Thanks.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
samples.
It's so cool, so cool. So get a little bit into Muse, maybe.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about Muse. So you produced. Did you do the full Origin Symmetry, or did you just get involved in a few of the tunes on there?
I did a few of the songs. Yeah, I did sort of the 6 more singly songs
Yeah, so it'd be
on
like
that. And
Newborn
Lucky,
Bliss,
yeah,
Plug-in Baby, Dark
Lucky
Shines.
Baby Bliss, yeah, yeah. The Lucky did the rest of it.
Cool. That's
Who's
very
a
cool.
great guy. John Lecky's fantastic.
Yeah, there's got a documentary of this making this album is really slick. It's pretty funny. They're
Yeah.
because they're funny. It seems like they're very interesting, fun dudes. Like I mean, they're one of the biggest bands in the world now, of course. But at the time, this was kind of like their breakthrough. So like, what was it like working with those guys and that sound at that point? Because it was
So
definitely different.
so yeah, it's funny. They were sort of in the middle of touring and doing stuff. So it was kind of uh, my job was at that point was as much as anything to keep Matt focused on the things that we were doing, because he was extremely creative in that he would have multiple ideas at the same time. And so we'd be in the middle of recording one part, and he'd be like, "Oh, I got this other idea." And of course, we had everything set up. I like to have everything set up and ready to go all the time. So we would go over to like the roads and like, "Oh, but I want to try this part." And it's like, "Okay, let's record a bit of that so we know your idea. Now let's go back and finish off the guitar part that you were playing. Then we'll move to this." And it was just like this constant rotation of multiple ideas and trying to focus him in to finish off one before we moved on to another. Walt's capturing the idea that he had. Like, he's like, "Okay, great, you got this idea. Let's get something down so that we know what it is.
Yeah.
Now let's go finish this other part."
Almost like a painter in a way where they just have to just get it out there before, you know what I mean? They
Yeah,
just have it in their mind and they just need to play it. And
yeah.
Get it out
I
before I
mean, I
lose it.
loved. He had a real, and the band, all the band, they had this real childlike, not childish, but childlike enthusiasm about creation,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful to be around and inspiring to be around, but they require somebody to focus that, because otherwise it just becomes like finger painting, and then everything turns into like brown.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It seems like that, like because like I mean I've watched that documentary a few times, but even like they're in a couple different studios in Europe and stuff, and they're in the control room, they're doing handstands, and they're all yelling at each other and setting things up as chaos, and just seems like a part
yeah,
of fun, to be fair. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So in terms of working with Muse and like they're kind of because this is kind of like I thought in my because this is a band I followed almost through from the beginning to now kind of thing.
mhm.
This to me was like their first professional album kind of thing. It's like this is what they were kind of shooting for this whole time. Their live sound kind of started to come together. What was it like trying to hone in that, like, because they kind of do this space rock, opera rock thing or whatever. Like, what was it like to hone that in? Because Matt uses crazy instruments and all these digital things, and you got chaos pads, and what's it like
Yeah.
trying to manage all that
He
craziness?
really explored the chaos pads after that, but he loved the idea of, like any great musician, he loved the idea of creating something new, something that hadn't been heard before, something that was exciting um, and unique. And so, like he would push the boundaries of what we could do. And it wasn't just standard guitar miking. It would be, mic something, but then what pedals can we do? And oftentimes in sessions, I'm sitting on the floor dialing pedals while somebody's playing, that kind of thing. And he would love to do that sort of thing. So playing and then kicking something, and it was just he had, like I said, they had this boundless enthusiasm and boundless creativity of being useful and childlike.
Yeah, and such a big sound they have too for a three piece too. Like they have so
Hmm.
many unique kind of sounds and different things they like to explore. And
Sure.
like that album came out when I think we were in high school
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah.
And like I just attached myself to that thing, and I still play it, to this day.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, Chris too. Chris, the bass player, is always explored different bass sounds and all
Yeah.
different tones to get out of the bass too. And they both inspired each other to try to do, again, unique things, something that people hadn't heard before.
And again, another incredible drummer in Dom.
Yep.
And these guys must have been using click tracks for some of this stuff, I guess. Hey, I don't know if we
Yes.
most, but it'd be
Yes, we
majority of it.
we use click tracks. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's another guy I kind of feel like is an underrated musician in the world. Is Dom? He's a amazing drummer and plays these
Yep.
small kits, but gets a lot out of the small kit kind of thing. Like, and now it's a
Mhm.
little bit different now. He's got a little electronic elements and stuff, but even still, it's not for the amount of racket that's coming out of this guy's drum kit. It's a pretty
Mhm.
small kit. It's just a standard rock kit. Like, there's nothing crazy going on,
Yep.
and a few
Yeah.
electronic bits and bobs. So do you
Okay.
have any contact with these guys still?
I'll see them when they come to play Toronto
Oh, right on, cool.
sometime. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I saw them, yeah, a couple of years ago when they came and played. Yeah, they, again, three creative individuals, with a lot of space to fill, right?
Yeah.
You end up building parts, building sounds. It's kind of, and then you're stepping on somebody else, so they have to go like, oh no, well then I'm going to do this. Then so it's again, if you have three, if you have people that you work with that inspire you and are creative, and you seek to both, you're competitive, so you want to be stronger than somebody else, but you also want them to be complementary. you know it's if you have that kind of respect and that kind of relationship with somebody, that then you're able to create something that is more than a sum of the parts, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. They're an incredible band. I think their journey is incredible, especially to where they are now, and what they can accomplish, and the shows they play, and these tours that they do. Like, I mean, it's like Taylor Swift level stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Like, it's crazy to see, because I remember watching like would have been like a live at Pink Pop maybe in like 1998, I want to say, and like
Mhm.
Matt's playing this crazy old Ibanez that he's got a bunch of gear strapped to, and he's like 21, and he just
Mhm.
like, to see that to go to where it is now, kind of thing. It's crazy. It's super
Mhm.
cool. It's very interesting. It's cool to talk with you about it too, because it's very like a highlight album of our childhood kind of
Yeah,
thing.
impactful for
Very
sure.
impactful
Cool.
for you. Yeah, changed my stance when as a musician. It changed the way I wanted to play instruments. It made me want to go buy pedals and explore weird things and buy a piano and kind of go down the
Mhm.
Matt Bellamy road. But that's kind of what I will be the first. I wanted to be in a space rock band. I wanted to like play space dance music, and that's all I wanted to do because of Muse.
Cool.
Yeah, obviously I didn't achieve that, but that's here or there. But so get a little bit into Silverchair too, because
Hence the
this.
NASA hoodie.
Oh, it's this one. But we'd like to get into Silverchair, because this is another big, like, you kind of worked with pretty much every one of our favorite bands along the way.
Yeah,
I would say.
I
I mean,
think
pretty close.
from Lateralis, Origin of Symmetry to Diorama, I think kind of shaped my whole
Yeah.
high school years and my whole musical core, almost, in a
To a
sense,
certain degree, yeah.
right? So it's amazing. I can't thank you enough again for being on here and talking to us. But yeah, we got to
You're very
definitely
welcome.
get into Silverchair here, because definitely one of my favorite groups.
Oh yeah,
growing
and
up.
Diorama's probably one of my like, I hate to say favorite album of all time, but it's close. It ties for first, but a lot of other
Yeah.
ones kind of thing. Um,
Interesting. So
yeah,
that's one of the records that kind of fell through the cracks in America.
100%.
I think so.
In
Yeah.
North America.
Oh, 100%. And
Yeah.
I think it's a
Everybody
super
loved
shame.
Frog Stomp, and
Yeah, and I mean that. And there's nothing wrong with Frog Stomp. It's just that I'm a 40-year-old man now, and I want to get a
Sure.
little bit more out of my music than teenage stuff. And there's nothing wrong with Frog Stomp. There's nothing wrong
No.
with any of the albums. But
Kind of like
Diorama was like,
Frog Stomp was written when he was 14 years
yeah,
old.
exactly. Like,
You
yeah,
know?
super good for a
This is what
14-year-old.
drove me nuts. This is what drove me nuts about the people. Not the manager. The manager, John Watson, was a great guy. But when they signed to Atlantic in the States, there was a couple of A&R guys that signed them, and I went to meet with Daniel about the kind of record he wanted to make. And he said, I'm wanting to make my Pet Sounds. I'm wanting to make my Sergeant Pepper. It's going to be kind of crazy and wacky. It's going to be fantastic, super interesting, but not, commercially. He's not going to write Year 2000 anymore. He's not going to write, Anna's Song again. He's not going to write the same things that he had done before, but he wanted to be creative. He wanted to be interesting. So I went to a meeting with the A&R guys, and they said, yeah, he can go off and do these like wacky things, and then we'll send him back in the studio, and he can write a couple of rock singles, and we'll be fine. And I said, well, I don't think he wants to do that, because he addressed that same thing. He says they'll try and send me back in, and we'll probably have to go back in again one more time and record some more songs. But this is what I really want to do. And I said, okay. And I said to them, this is what he wants to do. And they're like, yeah, whatever. So we started to do the record, and we came up with the record, and we presented it to them. And they're like, okay, go in and do a couple more songs. And we did, and they were not bad. But he was sort of half-hearted about it, because it was like I said, I wanted to do this thing, and not do a standard rock thing, because I want to express myself this way. And if you listen to his albums as they grew until we got to that record, it was growing in a way that was sort of like his audience maybe wasn't growing as quickly with him, or the record companies weren't so supportive of him. It sort of drove me nuts, because a band like Radiohead, for example, had, they had Creep, and then they had the bands, and then they came out with OK Computer, which was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Paranoid Android as a single was a pretty unique single, but Capitol got behind it.
Yeah.
They said, you know what? This record, we're going to spend a lot of money on this record supporting this, and then it exploded,
Mhm.
right? If Atlantic had done the same with Diorama, I have a feeling that the result would have been similar, because the quality was the same.
Absolutely.
But because they didn't, it sort of fell through the cracks, and I was really disappointed, because I thought we had come up with a really creatively unique and interesting record.
Oh,
Yeah.
But
oh,
the support from outside. This is not internal. This is not with their management. This wasn't with their direct
yeah.
support system right away. But from outside, like, nobody wanted to do anything. Then Daniel got sick. He got this reactive arthritis. He couldn't tour it right away, so they were just like, okay, done. And I
Yeah.
was really disappointed, because we'd worked very hard on that, and I thought we'd come up with something that was pretty unique and pretty exciting.
Oh, I think so. It's like I say, in terms of like say albums that came out, say from I don't know, say from like 1990 to 2010, somewhere in that span. Like to me, it's one of the most dynamic, most interesting albums to come out in that 20-year gap. Like you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
the 80s were the 80s. A lot of strange, weird things going on there, but there's a lot of good stuff came out of the 80s and stuff. But it changed in the 90s, obviously, right? And they came out early in the
Mm-hmm.
90s. That early sound, they were kids to where they ended up.
Mm-hmm.
Like that record is incredible, like just incredible.
Yeah, they were very inspired by early grunge music when they were 14 years old. Who wasn't
Mhm.
Yeah,
when you're 14, 15 years old, right? You're going to
loud,
write
screaming
what you
music.
know. But as an artist, I don't use the sort of musical genius that lightly, but he's one of those people that's in that category of he's really extremely creative and troubled with it,
For sure.
but like musically, like really something special. Like the piano parts that he wrote on that, he had never played piano before. He bought a piano, and he wrote Tuna on that song
Yeah,
on the piano when he didn't know how to play it. Now he got Paul Mack to play the part,
but
but he wrote it,
Mhm.
yeah,
right?
yeah, it's crazy.
Like even
It's
this. So
crazy.
we got this in that session, in that we actually got a harpsichord in, And because Daniel never played keyboard instruments before, he didn't use his thumbs at all. He just played with 4 fingers like that. And he was playing the harpsichord. And the guy that brought the harpsichord in, it's like, well, how did you know that that's the way you play a harpsichord? And he's like, what are you talking about? It's like, that's just the way I play. You don't play, apparently, you don't play a harpsichord with your thumbs. You play it with just your 4 fingers on each hand.
Wow.
But he wrote those parts. Like, I mean, he's a prodigy. He was something very special. And, I don't know, like a lot of situations, things don't work out sometimes, but he was incredibly creative to work with. And I mean, it was a really fraught time when we were making that record. We watched September 11th happen from the control room, basically. It was sort of late at night, and this plane flies into the Twin Towers. It was really something, that sort of time period. But yeah, I mean, incredible experience. Loved being in Australia. Really seduced by the country. It was and the people, fantastic people.
That's awesome.
So
what was it like working with Daniel in that era? Like, because it was a time. I mean, he came. He's transitioning into this thing, and I mean, to a certain degree, not to say that Silverchair were on the rocks, but it was in a strange place for them. I feel like because Daniel was kind of like becoming Silverchair as much as that wasn't really what anybody wanted necessarily, and they have a lot of stuff. But like, what was it like working with him in that time? Because I know prior to that, of course, he had different issues, for Neon Ballroom and stuff, and then leading into, which is, to me,
Sure.
like he's stacking up to Diorama essentially, right? So when you guys hit Diorama, it's like you all fulfilled the dream kind of thing for him. So what was it like working with him in that time frame, though?
I mean, it was very exciting because he was good in the band. The band were kind of like, very supportive of him. They're like, "What do you want us to do? What do you want? What are you looking to try and create? And what can we do to help you do that? And we had arguments. We did a lot of rehearsing, a lot of pre-production, and we would have arguments about within the band, and me and Daniel, and but we ended up coming up with something that was good. But it was the band were very, very supportive of what he was trying to do, because he was like, do I want to keep Silverchair going, or do I want this to be a solo thing, or and the band were like, whatever you want to do, and we'll play what you want.
And of course, you guys had cameras in the studio the whole time, right? You were making dioramas.
Some of the time, not the entire time, but some of the time. Yeah.
Was that the first experience you've had with that going on in the background through the whole
I think
process?
that was one of the earliest ones. Yeah, one of the early ones where we had cameras. Now it's like, it happens all the time. You can't escape it. Well, content, right?
Yeah, everybody's got their Facebook camera in their pocket.
Yeah,
exactly.
So that was before, it was a special thing to put out a DVD with the backstage kind of making of, right?
Yeah. I remember watching that for the first time, and like, because I mean, we're from Newfoundland too. We're a little small town in Newfoundland, of course, originally. So growing up, you don't see anything. You don't get any documentaries. You barely got cable. All these types of things. So like to see at that age, an impressionable age still, and to see the behind the scenes of such an impressionable record, and seeing how it was done and how it is emotional, it's hard, it's fun, it's all these things at once. It was awesome.
Sure.
Yeah, it was really
cool. Where in Newfoundland?
So we're from Bishop's Falls, like pretty much smack center. Yeah.
I got a friend from Corner Brook.
Oh, cool.
Cool.
Yeah, that's not far from us. We're like 3 hours, 2.5 hours, kind of thing. Yeah. We're dead center. They're a little more west than us.
Okay.
Yeah, cool spot. Very cool spot, actually.
I've never been to the Rock, so I'd love to go one day.
You should check it out. Yeah, go in the summertime when it's warmish, less rain and less snow.
Yeah,
but go check out George Street. George Street Fest, like, they have really good. They got whoever's taken over all the festival stuff, kind of downtown tourism-y stuff or whatever. Excellent job lately. They've got a couple of different things going on, and so they still do George Street Fest, of course, and then they do Iceberg Alley now, which is down in Kitty Vitty Village. Beautiful outdoor concerts. You're down like right on the ocean in this old 500-year-old village kind of thing. It's a beautiful place. But yeah, so check if you ever got time off.
I'd love to get there. You know what? I'd love to get there. It's one of those. I've been across Canada. I think the only place in Canada I haven't been is Nunavut. I haven't been there, or Yukon Northwest, but never been to the Rock. I'd love to go to the Rock.
Check that place out.
Definitely worth it.
Definitely worth it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is. I've got friends from there, so
there you go. All the more reason to go visit.
Exactly.
Could you tell us a little bit about your studio you're building, and like what kind of projects you're working on nowadays?
So right now I'm developing a young artist from Toronto, Jay Willow, his name. I'm working on some. Well, I'm taking my surround sound here down to Dundas, and I'm working on a project with Geddy Lee. If we can get all of the materials for his solo record and do that in surround in
Nice.
Atmos.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Nice.
Yeah, but I've literally been banging nails and doing drywall and sort of doing that for the studio. I like doing that kind of work. So, like I said, I was hanging speakers the other day. So yeah, it's gonna be great. It's in my girlfriend's house. She's acquiesced. She's giving me a room.
Nice.
So it's like you can have that room. So build something in there.
Make it fit.
But she's really into it. She's really excited about it. She's not involved in the music industry at all. So I was like, okay, if we're gonna do this, I have to soundproof this entire thing. Otherwise, I'm gonna drive you crazy.
Yeah.
Because I can be working on the same measure of a song for an hour.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
it will
sir.
drive you nuts.
Yeah.
So
Working on drums
That's
for
the best part. The loop,
Yeah.
the hour loop of the same half a measure. That's the best
that's
part.
it. That's it.
So
Like
if
and it's funny, you can say that to somebody and explain it, but you have to experience it to really understand
yeah,
like
yeah.
what it is. So
And it's funny too because I find if I'm working on something, it doesn't bug me in any kind of way. But if I
of
had to
course not.
sit in this room and listen to that same measure, I'd lose my
Sure.
mind after 10
That's
minutes.
it.
It's
That's
so
exactly
funny.
it. If you're working on it, it's totally natural.
Yeah, it doesn't even.
Feels fine.
Yeah, it does
If you're
nothing.
sitting listening to it, drives you crazy.
It's really funny. So if
That's why I
you,
don't have bands come and sit in on mixes.
that's a very smart move. That's a very smart move. So have
Years
you?
of experience,
That's,
boys. Years of experience.
there you go. Take notes, everybody. Take a note. young producers, young engineers out there, take a few notes. So have you kind of switched? I wouldn't say switched because I mean everybody kind of still mixes here. But are you kind of approaching Atmos now as kind of like your thing now?
It's one of my things. Yeah. It's. I mean, I don't know that there's enough to be just doing that.
Oh,
I
okay.
still love to do stereo mixes.
Yeah.
Still love to do productions. So I'd like to think that I'd get bored doing only one thing all the time.
Yeah.
So going out and doing a production, developing a young artist, doing an Atmos mix, doing a stereo mix, you know.
That's cool.
The only things that I don't do is I don't tour anymore, and I don't do live sound.
Yeah.
Just
that's
because
okay.
it's not my skill set.
Yeah.
It's not I don't it's not that I don't like it, but I mean the thing about the studio is I love to be able to go back and fix a problem, whereas live you can't.
yeah.
And there's a certain energy and enthusiasm about that, and I like that, but I'm always dissatisfied by the
Mhm.
end of the night. It's very rare that I get to the end of the night of doing live sound and be like, yeah, that was great. I really nailed that. For me, it's like, no, can we go play that song one more time? I just
Yeah.
want to throw out the kick drum sound. It wasn't quite right.
Yeah, it's a different animal too because you're trying to accommodate for a bunch of sounds and a bunch of different things. You know, it's a whole different. To me,
And a
that's
room.
yeah. To me, those are like two different people almost. Like that's not very often.
I know people that do both. I know
Oh,
people that do both. It's just not my skill set.
yeah.
I focused on the one, and I think I got better at that, and sort of I'm mediocre at best at live sound. So
That's cool.
What have been some of your favorite studios to record in and work in?
some of my favorites. Well, Real World definitely is a very I have a very soft spot in my heart for that place because I spent so many years there. Um, but I liked there. I liked it at Ocean Way at Cello in Los Angeles. Um, I liked working at um, the New York studios that I worked at. I worked at Soundtrack a lot. They're mixing mainly in the downstairs room. Um, Electric Lady was fun just because it's Electric Lady.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, I like Metalworks in Toronto.
Right.
It was
Metalworks
great
is cool.
recording there, and this little place called Union Sound in Toronto was fantastic.
Union
Oh,
Sound. Yeah.
Old Neve desk. The thing about it is studios are great. It's more about the people that are working there, and if you really connect with some of the people, then any studio can sound really great.
Right.
It just depends on how you use it and the people that are working it. So, like Union Sound's a great studio. It's not flashy, but the people there are amazing and the sounds you get are fantastic. So that's one. Um, yeah, I mean, over the years, so many different ones, been around the world, Guillaume Tell
Yeah.
in Paris, all these crazy things. The Farm, which doesn't exist anymore, in England. Like
So many
yeah,
different cool vibes, right? So many
Yeah.
cool.
yeah, so many different vibes. I mean, I love to move around. I never wanted to be at any one place for too long.
Yeah.
Because and I think it's stood me well because I can go into any studio, listen to it for a bit, learn it, and then be able to record there. Whereas if I think you work at one place, you get used to that one thing, and then moving somewhere else becomes more difficult. But
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love to work in different places. It's inspiring to work in different places, in different spaces.
Different gear, different paths, different signal paths.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. So what's your two pieces of desert island gear?
Probably my mic, my M7S mic. It's an old. We used to call it the Hitler mic or the lollipop mic, or
Yeah.
it's a great vocal mic. I use it for pretty much everything. Um, and I don't know, should I say my bass guitar? Probably not. But
You can say whatever you feel.
yeah, I mean, I use the UAD system
Mm,
for all my mixing, and it has such great vintage sounding analog plugins. It's not perfect recreate. Nothing's a perfect recreation of an old 1073
yeah,
mic pre, but I mean every 1073 mic pre sounded different. So
there is
why would
that.
it be? But just the philosophy they have of making the way that they make equipment it fits with my sensibility
Nice. Do you find yourself mixing in the box more now? So that, like
all the
in the
time,
digital world kind of thing.
all the time.
Nice, nice.
Yep.
I was
Yep.
curious
I
about
mean, clients want little adjustments to things. So recreating a mix. If you have an analog, big SSL console, which I love working on,
yeah,
but it's like you have to say, okay, but if you want to recall, it's going to cost you a day of studio time, and it's not going to be the whole mix is not going to be exactly the same.
yeah,
So it's like I do it at my studio in the box, and they can get exactly what they had with you know the vocal line in chorus two up half a dB.
nice. So you're mixing in the box when you're recording. Are you using a lot of outboard gear? It's still the same idea, kind of using the digital,
Depends.
equipment.
It depends on where I am.
I guess, yeah.
If I'm recording at home, then it'll be gear in the box. If I'm recording in a studio, I'll see what they have.
Nice.
It's rare when I have to rent things in these days, but
Oh, okay. Yeah, the digital world has changed. Like, are you a proprietor of the digital stuff, or are you kind of like it's is what it is kind of thing?
I use the tools that get the best result.
Nice.
So and I utilize the tools in the space where I am with the musician, and I try to not let the technology get in the way of the musician's creativity.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, David, my friend, thank you so much for sitting and chatting with us and answering all of our foolish questions and fanboying over stuff. And but we do really appreciate your time and really appreciate you answering all of our questions and speaking with us tonight. It's awesome.
Yeah.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Oh, anytime.
Yeah.
Anytime at all.
So, yeah. So
All right.
grateful to have you on here. So yeah, all the best with the new studio, and we can't wait to hear some of your work in the future.
Yeah. Looking
Thanks,
forward to
thanks
Johnny
very
Johnny
much.
Faye's new stuff. I was listening to some of that stuff that came out the other day. I'm waiting for more of that. That's cool.
Which stuff? Sorry.
The Johnny Faye stuff.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
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 It's really cool, that record, isn't it?
It's cool, yeah. It is very cool.
Yeah,
I like ambient stuff.
yeah,
Like I like that kind of stuff. I'm into that. So yeah,
yeah.
I seen it was coming out, so I popped up a single and give it a couple.
Johnny's really exploring different areas. Yeah, it's fantastic.
That's cool.
And he's a stellar human being.
He seems
So
like a really genuinely nice guy.
Yeah.
genuinely nice person. Yeah,
Awesome. There we
an
go.
extremely creative individual.
Awesome. And we snuck in a little bit of hip for everybody.
There you go.
Well, awesome, David. Thank you so much again, and best of luck as always, and great success in your new studio.
Thanks very much, guys. Great to talk to you tonight.